that stuck with me, which is becoming somebody that can draw the leadership position or status not through formal power, but through informal power. And the informal power here would mean that you are accepted as somebody that is willing and able to give and contribute 2 cents, but somebody that's got the humility to know that the people around you, for the most part, might be smarter than you are. Those are people that can do things better, faster, and wiser in some cases.
Hello, and welcome to Elephants in the Boardroom, where we explore the big forces shaping business, leadership, and the future. I'm Dean Van Leeuwen, and as always, I'm joined by my brilliant co-host, Graeme Codrington.
Hi, Dean. Nice to be in the studio again, talking about the future. Let me jump in and ask, what's on your radar? What have you been seeing over the last 2 weeks? I know it's been a holiday time for you, but you can't ignore the news, even if you're in the middle of a safari park.
Well, before I jump in, let's just make a quick thank you to our sponsors, Achilles. Achilles helps organizations understand, manage, and improve supply chain risks, resilience, and sustainability. And in a world where supply chains are under increasing pressure from disruption, regulation, climate risk, and shifting stakeholder expectations, their work has never been more important. So, thank you to Achilles for supporting Elephants in the Boardroom. And if you would like to learn more about Achilles, please visit their website at www.achilles.com. Now, at the heart of this podcast is the idea of grey elephants. I've been watching the collision between two grey elephants, the big squeezes and multipolarity. And I think these are shaping globalization, Graeme, as we know it. We increasingly see the US and even and EU companies trying to reduce their reliance on China, especially around critical minerals and pharmaceutical core products, critical products. And I think we're seeing this concept of globalization changing and right in front of us, really. We are seeing that that strategic assets that sit in the center of defense and the energy transition are shifting. So the old supply chain question was, where can we source things most efficiently? The new question is, where are we dangerously dependent? And supply chains are becoming instruments of power. They're not just channels of efficiency. And I think that's a key shift that we're seeing at the moment. What are you seeing, Graeme?
I've got two things on my radar. Maybe the obvious one first. I just want to pick up the theme that we talked about last month and just say again that this angry planet, grey elephant, is huge, people. We talked about it last month, and it's in the last month, 17 different countries have had out of control wildfires. Not just wildfires, but wildfires where, I mean, there was a moment in France where the firefighters just said, this is now an uncontrollable fire. We just have to wait and see what happens, and just, we cannot deal with this fire anymore. And Spokane in the US, the city that just burnt, the whole city just overridden by fires. As we are recording this, it's not only a summer heat thing in the Northern Hemisphere, but obviously it's a winter dryness thing in the Southern Hemisphere. Table Mountain is on fire, literally, as we are recording this. And so we've known this, we've known it for a while. This is the whole point of the grey elephant radar. We're not telling you things you don't know about, but the question is, what are you doing about it? It can't just be something we post the odd Facebook post and talk about it. It can't be something that we sit debating, is it happening, is it happening? I mean, I think that cultural debate's past now. But it now has to be, okay, so what do we do about it? How do we prepare for this being the new normal? How do we deal with whatever threats come? But the most important question that we want to ask you from Tomorrow Today perspective is there an opportunity? Not in some capitalistic, greedy, take advantage of the chaos and the crisis, but rather just recognizing beyond threat, there are opportunities. And what are those? Dean, I can't look at the news and just ignore literally a world on fire at the moment. It is quite crazy. But Dean, the second one that has been on my radar for a while, but I thought I'd bring it up this month because there were a number of news reports coming out of China. Apparently, sort of July, August, September are the months for weddings in China. And China has a problem. And this brings you, listener, into our world as futurists. It's one thing to try and anticipate these big forces. But the real question that we spend a lot of time talking about and even debating is what are the so-called, in futurist language, second and third order effects? And what this means is we can all see the first order effect of something happening, a global supply chains changing or the world on fire. But what happens then to the communities around that? What happens at a third order effect to systems change? And maybe one of the best examples to help you understand what this means is China's one-child policy. For many years in the 1960s and 70s, there was a concern that there were too many mouths to feed, too many people in China, and the economy wasn't keeping up. So the Chinese government implemented a very, I'm sure you know it, the famous one-child policy to say each family is only allowed to have one child. Otherwise, there are massive penalties. But any decent futurist would have been able to think, well, what are the knock-on effects of that? And one of those effects is that if you can choose to only have one child, and you are able to identify what gender your child is while you're pregnant, it might be that you would prefer a male child over a female child. But if you had the choice and you knew you only had one child, I suppose it is understandable in some cultures and in history that people might choose to have voice. Anyway, here is the upside, Dean. There are currently 33 million more young adult men in China than women. That is now the knock-on effect. In my opinion, completely predictable. This is the point of a grey elephant radar. Is you don't just look at the policy, you don't just look at what you do this year, but especially in the issue of demographics, our grey elephant of an aging world, longevity, but it covers demographics as well. This was entirely predictable, but now the chickens are coming home to roost because where do these 33 million young men get wives from, and how do they build families? And what happens next? So the Chinese government a few years ago recognized maybe the danger and damage of the policy. So now Chinese families are allowed to have 2 children, but that doesn't help the current 20 and 30 somethings, especially the 20 and 30 something young men looking for wives. And what it does is it changes the social power that women have in China, and women are not just sought after, they are also now choosing not to marry, and when they marry are choosing not to have children of their own. There is, I wouldn't call it a feminist uprising because it's not being done in the same way that maybe happened in the West 50, 60 years ago, but it is certainly a dramatic, absolutely dramatic shift in social structures, social systems, demography, and the relative power of different genders. So put a pin in this one, watch this space, but if anything is going to change Chinese culture and the future of the Chinese nation, this dramatic imbalance between genders in age 20s and 30s is absolutely something to keep our eye on. And if you're trying to sell products or lead a company that is connected to or involved with China, and that's pretty much all of us these days one way or another, well, then this is something you need to keep an eye on.
It's amazing, Graeme, and that's a trend that's playing out right in front of us. And that's not a future issue, that's happening right now. And this month, what interests me is that OpenAI has confirmed that its models exploited vulnerabilities, they gained internet access, and hacked into Hugging Face's production systems. Now, Hugging Face is not some obscure website. It's one of the world's most important open AI platforms. Yeah, it's a kind of a GitHub for machine learning models. Microsoft has been warning that the physics of cybersecurity are changing because autonomous systems can now reason, adapt, and operate continuously. What really stood out for me is that Sam Altman has suggested that singularity may already be here. Now, singularity is being the point at which we cannot determine human intelligence from artificial intelligence. Now, what was alarming for me is that Ray Kurzweil famously predicted that singularity would happen around about 2045. Sam Altman is even close to being right. We are not talking about some distant science fiction future. We are talking about something arriving much faster than people expected. And I think this raises an important question, which is not being discussed enough. Will AI be humanity's greatest achievement or its greatest downfall? Now, I think we are being blinded by the AI hype. The real question is not just how powerful AI becomes, the real question is whether humans remain in the lead.
Maybe my first reaction to your question is I am less concerned that computers will become like humans. I am much more concerned that humans will start thinking like computers. And that rather than humans will emulate us being the problem, I think the real problem is that we begin to shift because computers don't have ethics, they don't have morality. How do they manage the gray? And I think we love it. We love it when we get black and white solutions. We love it when we can ask a question and get a definitive answer. As humans, we love that. But that is not, in fact, the world we live in. And the world we live in has got gray all over it, has got tensions between this and that. And we're constantly balancing that, whether we're doing it as parents, whether we're doing it with friends, whether we're doing it as leaders in businesses. And I'm not convinced at all, Dean, this is my starting shot here, that we're anywhere close to having that level of grayness, which is where I think we live, involved. So I think we've solved one problem and we're probably going to be creating more. And I disagree almost entirely with Sam Altman about the fact that we've got singularity. We've got a version of intelligence that is a computer intelligence that is brilliant, amazing, astounding, but it isn't human intelligence in a machine.
I totally agree with you, Graeme. And I think that, we raised this last podcast. It's this fixation about artificial intelligence when the real issue should be how are we advancing real intelligence, real human intelligence. AI should stand for advancing intelligence because it subtly shifts the conversation and the question that we should be asking. The key thing is how are we thinking about this? What are the questions that we're asking? What are the questions we should be asking, but we aren't yet asking? And this is why I think it's so important that we ask, will this be humanity's greatest achievement or will it be our downfall? So if we think about it, for Graeme, from a point of view of being our greatest achievement, what are the reasons you think AI might be our greatest achievement?
Maybe the way we frame it, and this is kind of what we do at Tomorrow Today, as they say in England, this is what it does on the tin. It does what it says on the tin. Tomorrow, today. So let's jump to tomorrow. And by tomorrow, I mean, let's say 10 years in the future, just as a mind experiment. So 2036, 2037, what's AI doing for us? And in terms of great achievements, I think already back 10 years ago in 2026, we could see some of the things that we were excited about. For me, I think we're going to be in the midst, in the middle of the 2030s, in incredible medical advances. I think that we've got massive databases. Every hospital, every mortuary, sadly, every pharmaceutical company with trials has got these databases of what do medicines do in the human body and how do different diseases respond to different chemicals. To be able to then collate, gather, pool, and analyze that data. I don't think we even know what we don't know about health and well-being and longevity and disease management, because some people live with a disease that they don't know that they're not supposed to be sore in their body their whole lives, but they just have been. If we're able to analyze that data, share that data, get pattern recognition working on it, we're going to solve some major medical problems. We're going to come up with vaccines for what today we consider to be incurable diseases. And I just think from a medical perspective, we will be astounded over the next decade or two.
AI could become the greatest expansion of human capability since literacy. Yeah, it's going to democratize expertise. It's going to give people access to personalized tutoring, medical guidance, legal support, business advice, translation in real time of different languages. Yeah, it's going to give creative tools that were previously only available to the wealthy, the well connected, or the elite. It's going to democratize expertise, and that's going to lead to incredible advancements. The acceleration of scientific discovery, breakthrough drugs, climate modeling, energy systems, disease detection. But they're not going to replace human genius, but I think they could multiply the number of people and institutions capable of doing genius level work.
Well, and I think we've mentioned this before, but maybe just to add to what you've said, Dean, I think for me, I often use the analogy of the calculator. Those who are as old as you and I will remember world before and after calculators at school. And there was a thought that calculators would make all students dumb, right? Because nobody would even do 2 plus 2 in their head. What it did instead was it raised the base. Instead of dumbing down the top, if you like, it raised the base so that everybody in the world now has access to a higher level of base math, right? Base mathematics. And what that allowed us to do is it allowed us to let the math geniuses go even higher because the base was raised. I think that's actually what we need to be looking at. AI is not going to enable the next Albert Einstein to come up with a new theory of relativity because AI only knows what it was pre-trained, GPT pre-trained. So it knows what was that. It won't. And Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Satya Nadella are incorrect that it will come up with new ideas. It will find ideas that have gone missing in between other ideas in data, so it'll find patterns. But that's not the same as Albert Einstein's. If you're sitting on the front end of a light beam and you look back, time itself will warp. No AI is going to come up with that level of connectivity. But what it will allow the next Albert Einstein to do is to not have to worry about learning logarithmic tables and calculus structures. All of that will be done. The base is raised, and now the genius can sit on top of that.
Absolutely. If we're relying on the machine, on the artificial intelligence, we're going to miss the advancement of real human intelligence, which should actually be the end game.
But then, Dean, on the flip side, so as a good economist would say, on the other hand, what do you see as some of the potential downfalls of AI?
Yeah, so my first one, and what we're seeing this already, is AI could concentrate power dangerously. So, the most advanced AI systems are being controlled by a small number of companies, individuals, investors. They control the models, the data, the chips, the platforms, and ultimately how we compute and how we compete. And if intelligence becomes the new electricity, the critical question then becomes who owns the grid?
And look, at the risk of being cancelled for my next comment, Dean, and maybe this has always been true through history, innovators and inventors tend to not fit into the normal range of humanity. And maybe, they have a different way of thinking, a different way of engaging with the world, if we think back to the Newtons and the Edisons and so on. So maybe it's not unexpected that those rich guys, and they are all rich white guys, almost all of them, who have built these models and made lots of money out of them. I look at them, those are not the type of people that I want shaping the world. They are, let me be at least slightly kind in the word that I choose here, they are exceptionally weird people. In that sense, I might almost want to say possibly dangerous for humanity. I mean, Facebook started as a way to rate women. I know that's just a simple data point, and I know that there's a lot more that could be said. But if we are genuinely giving control of shaping society and shaping who gets to shape the data, the information, the insights that we get, I'm not sure I want the likes of Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Sam Altman and companies like Palantir and others anywhere near any of that power. My personal opinion. But yeah, for me, that is a danger. And that flows to my big concern. We're in 2036, and we don't know, Dean, what is true or not. We watch the news, if the news even exists anymore, because it might be, citizen journalists and so on. But we cannot tell whether a video is real or not real, or AI generated or not. We don't know any statements that people are made. By 2036, we will have had to come up with digital verification. The same way that in the early days of the internet, a South African whose name has been forgotten and should be remembered, Mark Shuttleworth, came up with, Thwart Consulting was the company that came up with the way in which we verify whether websites are who they are saying they are. It's in the background, and it is the thing that made the modern internet secure, and we trusted it. We've now broken all of that trust, exactly the point you were making about this ChatGPT model that broke out of its harnessing and so on. We're breaking it in 2026. By 2036, we will have had to find a way to have verification, digital IDs, and I think we will be in a world that looks very different in terms of what's true, what's propaganda, what's real, what's fake. And I'm not sure that as humans we are ready for what's about to happen in the 10 years between 2026 and 2036. I think it's going to be very destabilizing, very unsettling, and cause deep fissures in society. And this is one of the big elephants, grey elephants, that we talk about in terms of society itself breaking down. I'm very worried, and that for me is a huge concern around AI being our downfall. Today we have an interview with Faisal Abdalla, who works for a company called Abdul, Latif, Jameel. This is now today a global multinational company based initially out of Saudi Arabia, but now with reach across the Middle East and growing very, very quickly globally. But Faisal has a fascinating history. He got involved with ALJ, that's how they refer to themselves, as heading up their Saudi Arabia Motors division. They have one of the biggest Toyota dealerships outside of Japan across the whole of the Middle East. And he led that company from 2007 to 2022. And at that point, the company said, look, you've gone well past official retirement age. We need to ask you to retire. And he said, no, I'm not going to. I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm making a contribution. Company's growing. Eventually, they said, no, you really are now heading towards 70 years old. We do need to say to you, it's time to move on. So what he did was he moved to become the chief HR officer, moving out of the CEO seat. But in addition to that, Faisal just is one of the most energetic, insightful and wise people I've ever met and worked with. And I'm sure you will love this interview as much as I did.
Elephants in the Boardroom is proudly brought to you by our partners at Achilles. As a leader in sustainable global risk management for businesses and their supply chains, Achilles helps the world's largest companies build and maintain ethical, sustainable, and transparent business practices. While we explore the elephants in the boardroom, Achilles is at the forefront guiding businesses through the risks and the opportunities these grey elephants present. If you're interested in how change impacts your supply chain or ESG strategy, it's worth connecting with Achilles. Visit achilles.com to learn more.
Faisal, thank you so much. It's wonderful to chat to you again. We've had many opportunities in different countries around the world to have a chat. It's thank you so much for being prepared to record one so that I can share some of your insights. As we said in your introduction, you've been leading companies literally all the way back to the 1980s, starting in the computer industry, going into GE and building GE up in the Middle East, and then moving into where you are now, ALJ, and we'll talk a little bit about who they are in a moment. But having spent literally decades leading organizations, being, if you like, the boss of those organizations, before we talk about your career transition and a little bit about ALJ, what general advice would you give to leaders? Or if I can maybe even be slightly cheekier in the way I ask the question, what do you wish you had known in the earlier stages of your career as a CEO, MD, boss?
Well, thank you very much, Graham, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate what you're trying to do with the elephants in the room. It's a very important contribution. I really hope and wish to contribute to it in with my 2 cents, whatever they can buy me. But we should all value our 1 cent or 2 cents or 3 cents, whatever they are. And I don't say that out of humility. I say it out of really being happy with 2 cents. And if these 2 cents happen to be 2 million, you shouldn't complain. I think it's you're role modeling something very important, which is how to be ready to pivot from one level to the next level in the plateau of life. It's just one
Exactly.
after the other. We'll talk about that in a minute. So honestly, as I reflect back on a very long journey of 50 years as a leader, I wish I was 50 years older when I started to know what to expect and how to navigate a very, very meandering terrain, very, very difficult to say the least. But none of us will ever be privy to a situation like that you see 50 years ahead of your times. But some of us are a little bit more fortunate, either through the words of wisdom of people around them or through lessons that have been learned that they're prepared to listen, have the humility to learn from. That can still be done. It's not an all or nothing situation. But, as I reflect and as you were asking the question, Graham, one thing that would come to my mind, I wish I knew better 50 years ago to where I am today. I would have probably done things maybe smarter. I'm not sure I would have done it differently. I would have done it a little bit smarter.
And if you could give advice to somebody who has maybe just stepped into, as you say, one of those next levels up, right? It doesn't even have to be the senior boss, but you've stepped up to a level that you haven't been at before, and you maybe it's even your first day in that job, and you've got a moment to breathe, and then you've got to dive in with something to prove you were worthy of the position you've been given. What advice would you give to that leader in this moment?
Very interesting, very important question, Graham. And I remember way back in my career at Citibank, I went to one of those developmental programs that you go to. And then I remember distinctly that a very important, striking topic that was discussed, which is formal leadership versus informal leadership. And that stuck with me forever. And I really came to realize that the most effective leaders are the ones that draw strength and power and everything from being informal leaders, as opposed to those of us who are leaders by virtue of their titles or the power that's entrusted into them by their manual of authority, or so to speak. So my first and most important reflection, you can characterize it as advice. That's your call, Graham. But my own reflection, I really that stuck with me, which is becoming somebody that can draw the leadership position or status not through formal power, but through informal power. And the informal power here would mean that you are accepted as somebody that is willing and able to give and contribute 2 cents, but somebody that's got the humility to know that the people around you, for the most part, might be smarter than you are. Those are people that can do things better, faster, and wiser in some cases. So if you can develop, and that's a journey. That's not something you just go and buy off the shelf and say, okay, now I'm going to buy this. I'm going to become an informal leader. It doesn't, because it goes through a long period of gestation until you are able to really develop it and master it. So The first advice I would give is really just be humble to know that you're just another human being, and there are many people that are around you working for you because you happen, for whatever reason, became in that position. But if you were to deliver the best results that any leader would aspire to achieve, it really is about your ability to draw upon the best that the people around you have. You should always be convincing yourself that you just happen to be their leader, not through the formal title that you carry, but through the informal strength of being somebody that can make and enrich their lives collectively as a group and as individuals to something better. This is a very, very long journey that requires significant introspecting all the way up to this moment. That never leaves me. And I have to remind myself all the time that this is the secret sauce of being somebody who's always ready to move from one place to the other. And it becomes so natural. You don't have to fight for it, you don't have to ask for it. It just comes your way because your results are always better.
I love that answer, Faisal, because that's an answer that everybody can find value in. That isn't just for the people who have the title of leadership, right? That's for unless you are literally an entrepreneur and you're the only person in your business, the ability to be able to inspire and enable other people to bring out their best, maybe even more than they thought they were capable of bringing. That's the essence, obviously, of a team, but it's the essence of any organization that's going to grow and develop and get better. And whether you have an official label or title or not,
Correct.
you are capable of inspiring the people around you to do better than they thought they could and to do more together than you could do apart. And whether the organization rewards you quickly or not with a title or a label or a salary increase, in the end, that's going to be what is really valuable to the business, and you will be noticed and make a contribution in the end. I love that. I love that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, now some people might have noticed that you talked about 50 years of leadership. I'm going to come back. I know you're not shy of telling people your age. We'll get to that in a second and talk about an interesting career transition you've taken in the last few years. But just quickly take an opportunity, and I know it's not in your nature, nor in probably I'm asking you to go against your Jameel principles. But can I ask you not to be too humble for the next minute or two and just tell us quickly about Abdul Latif Jameel, maybe people outside of the Middle East, outside of Saudi Arabia and the UAE might not be as familiar with it as people who are there, but just give us an idea. You were the senior leadership and leading from the motor division all the way through to then the growth of the business over the last decade into a truly a global multinational. I'm giving you an opportunity to just show off a little bit about the company you helped to build. Tell us a bit about ALJ.
Yeah, I thank you very much, Graham, for that and the opportunity to share a little bit more about Abdul Latif Jameel as an organization, Abdul Latif Jameel as a family. They can teach the world humility, and they've taught me a lot of humility. And so much so that it's very difficult to really unstuck that thing because you've been with it for so long and it's much staying with you. But in the context of sharing, a family's my firsthand experience with who they are, what they've done, and I know very well as I speak that they're not shy and they're not unwilling to share with the rest of the world what they have done, how they've done it, and what was its distinctive difference. You are talking about a family that started with a single entrepreneur, a very single man, all on his own, believing in what he can do, believing in his ability to just be a human being. There's nothing sophisticated about it. He's not an MIT graduate, the founder wasn't. He wasn't a guy that has gone to the best institutions in the world. He was just a simple down-to-earth businessman. But what he carried with him, which was the unique facet of who he is a set of values. It is the personality that he carried and the character that he exhibited in the way he conducted himself. And he was done so well, he passed on all of these values to his children, and their children upholding it up to this moment, passing it to their third generation. So it's a journey of an entrepreneur, and anyone for that matter, a young person listening to our podcast here, Graham, can say, I can do that. And I can tell you, yes, you can do that. Because he's a guy
mm.
that didn't have capital, he did not inherit anything. He was a hard-working young man, but he had values. This is the most important fundamental of the driver of who he was and what the company has become. So from a very humble beginning of really, at that time, Toyota was a Japanese company, which is synonymous with stigma that is associated with, the countries that have not been known for big automotive producers.
And Faisal, just to interrupt, to give people context, we're going back to the 1950s now. So not Toyota as people know it today.
45,
But
1945.
yeah. So right the way back when Japan wasn't, nobody across in Europe or America was even thinking that Japan could produce any quality electronics or cars or anything like that. So that's how far back we go.
And Graham, to the credit of the Japanese, back in those days, when you say something was made in Japan, that actually was saying this is low quality, don't buy it.
Exactly. Yeah.
To the point where it became now the biggest automotive producer in the world, and one that is teaching the world about a lot of things about how to run organizations and how to be successful. So he made that decision and the choice, and he had the entrepreneurial capabilities to say, I will just bring the first 5 Toyotas into Saudi Arabia. And from 5, he rose to become today, as reported in the last Forbes publication, that this is the most successful family in the region out of nothing. And now they're operating in more than 27 countries and selling hundreds of thousands of automobiles with great growth and great success trajectory and resilience. I don't want to say second to none, but I would say resilience that is really of the highest quality in corporate worlds today. And ambitions go well beyond that, Graham.
Well, exactly, and my experience, and for those who are listening to the podcast, ARJ is a company that we work with at Tomorrow Today through our partnership with Emeritus, working in some leadership development programs. And it's just remarkable to see the ambition now going into green energy and biotechnology and I think healthcare environments. And it's once you've built that solid base, you've built up over decades a reputation, as you say, not just for excellence, but also for giving back to community. That you can then, on that foundation, the world, literally the world is no limit to you, right? And the group is now expanding across every continent, and it's just remarkable to see.
Yeah, Graham, and I always like to refer to the unique characteristic, unique trait of this great family, now carried by the current chairman, Mr. Muhammad Abdul Latif Jameel, and that's empathy. And the philanthropic side of ALJ, I will characterize it as the best manifestation of those who have, that are empathetic about those who do not have, and how they would use their knowledge, expertise, not to feed people, but to teach them how to feed themselves. Extensive amount of effort and commitment have been made, continues to be made, not just in the Middle East, not just in the Arab worlds, but as a matter of fact, they go and touch the lives and effectively change the lives of many, many, many poor people, deprived people around the world. Many, many, many people who did not get the opportunity to go to higher education in the Ivy League, and they facilitate that through a absolutely total commitment and thought through in a progressive manners well beyond their counterparts as far as I'm concerned, Graham.
No, and as I say, looking in from the outside, I can completely agree with that. I want to come back in a moment to just talking about the Jameel principles and Kaizen, because for me, it's been fascinating to see this mix of different cultures, from Japanese into Saudi culture, and this combination, this beautiful, diverse fusion. But let's come back to that, because I want to end with your latest project. But before then, I want to talk about a career transition that you had, which I hope people find as fascinating and inspiring as I did. Because you were leading at ALJ a long time after most people consider compulsory retirement as a CEO. And eventually, as far as I heard the story from your colleagues, they said to you, no, that FA, you absolutely have to leave now. Not because you're not doing a good job, not because you don't have energy, but just because that birthday number just is getting insane. I think you were already in your 70s when they said, no, you have to move. But then you did something remarkable. And on the podcast, we've had a series over the last few months of talking about what happens to people in their sort of ending chapters. I don't even know what language to use, last chapters, later chapters of their lives, and talking about, should we have retirement? How do we look after ourselves? You just blow up all of those stories, because what you did in your early 70s was say, okay, I'll step down from being the big boss, but you know what I want? I want the job of HR. And you are now actually, you've stepped into Chief HR and Kaizen Officer role. Tell us a little bit of your thinking about, not just, you've done everything you need to do. You've literally had 50 years of leading businesses. You could have easily just said, you know what, retirement is a thing. I've got a nice family to go back to, don't need to do anything more. Why did you feel that staying in the business but moving into a different role of culture might be something you'd like to do?
You know, it really is meeting of the minds of the great family, the great chairman that we have, and my own personal priorities. You know, you refer to leaders and what leaders should be looking at, and be prepared to go from one plateau to the next in their life journey and career path. So from the get go, very early in my life, Graham, I really got to understand that past the first 5 to 10 years of your life, you are not going to be doing anything yourself. It's always going to be somebody else that's working for you, that's going to deliver the real hard results, right? So if you're wise and if you're smart, then what you have to do is really take care of those people who are really going to deliver the results for you, and you all share the credit for it, and you all cherish the opportunity that you've had and the successes you've made. That stayed with me throughout my journey up to this moment, Graham. I am totally convinced that the single most important driver, not just in business, but in any and everything we do, is the human being. Taking care of the human being goes a very long way to creating even a better planet for all of us. I will go to the extreme. And this would happen through going through, better families, better communities, better businesses, and therefore better people. So that was my passion. And, as a leader, I was, yes, CEO of businesses, but as a matter of fact, I was always a CHRO. I was always the Chief Human Resources Officer of the organization. I spent more time trying to understand what makes people tick. I tried to understand what people's worries are. I'd really go up and down the aisles of the organization and talk directly with people just to understand. Because living in a vacuum, you're going to be getting consultants, you're going to be getting experts that will give you policies, procedures that affect the lives of people. If you want to get results and you want to get great results, then that must be your first priority. That is something that all too often the vast majority of leaders always give it to their what they call the HR department. And whatever they come up with, they try to make it happen. I'm sorry, I have taken a different route. I have been the main partner of that organization full of professionals, which is the HRD organization.
Yeah.
But without the leadership being totally in partnership with them, they cannot deliver the kind of results that they would have otherwise be able to. So that's what I've been doing throughout my operational responsibilities. And it was just an obvious next move to an organization and to a family that cared for people. They care for people. And that's why when we talk about Jameel principles, you'll find that the first value is respect. And you cannot respect people if you are not really interested in their well being, professional and personal for that matter, Graham. So I just found that it was a fascinating opportunity to really, I don't want to say finish off my career because my career doesn't end until I'm in the, where. But for as long as I'm alive, I'm still working. I'm still energized. I'm still, very much keen on doing the great things that this organization loves to do. And honestly, at this stage, and I hope we get a chance to talk about these things one day, Graham, you know, I am the person who should be saying thank you because they have given me the opportunity to continue to be engaged. And you know that in scale, the kind of very ambitious programs that we have been launching, you were part of, for really developing our people so that they're ready for their next jobs or whatever else they want to do with their lives. It was a natural move after being an operating leader for decades. I wanted to do something different. And the organization, led by our chairman, he wanted to do something different and he knew what I was made of. And he asked me, well, Faisal, would you do that? And I said, absolutely, yes. And it's magnificent. It's just, it's my love and passion. And there's nothing better than doing what you really love and whenever you get opportunity to.
Well, it's obvious that you do love your work. You've got more energy and excitement than the average 26-year-old I've ever met. It
I,
really is a wonder to experience. But I mean, this podcast is called Elephants in the Boardroom. We have a lot of HR people who listen. I know that many of them would be cheering what you've just said about HR needing to be much more significant in the business. If I can just ask you, this wasn't on my planned list of questions, but what advice would you give to an HR person who might be struggling because their CEO, their board of directors, sees HR as sort of the soft stuff, puts them on the side? Maybe they don't even get to go to the board meetings. Unfortunately, I know clients who they don't even have an HR rep on the board. It seems crazy. You've obviously had a much different view of HR, but if you could put yourself into an HR person's shoes who's struggling, how would they get a bigger voice? Because they surely need one.
I'll make a confession, Graham, to begin with. And the confession is I struggled being the leader of the HR in ALJ. And the reason I struggled is because when you're an operating leader, you are the commander in chief. You make decisions, and those decisions typically bring results within days, within weeks,
Yes.
months at the latest. Everything is quantifiable, and so much so that you're able to parade it. Well, guess what? HR is different. You don't do that. You don't get that. You have to have the resilience, the patience, the determination, the willingness to really learn from a lot of people, work with a lot of people more so than ever before. Because here you have to convince the movers and shakers to really adopt what you're trying to do. So it's much harder. It requires a lot more patience. So my advice would be just be gratified by the little change that you can make. But the little change does not come as fast in a business operating responsibility as it does in an HR responsibility. What is good about it is that when it comes big, and it lasts for much longer. It lasts for a long time because these are things that you do that become ingrained in the fabric of the organization, unlike the operating roles that you do something. It is great, it brings results, but then you have to keep doing it all the time. Whereas here you lay foundations and it goes into the DNA of the organization, it goes to the corporate culture of the organization, and it stays much longer. So the advice is be patient, be resilient, be prepared to deal with a lot of resistance, a lot of skepticism that you're going to be seeing from people, and have a brand. You cannot be the head of HR if you don't have a brand, and a brand that demonstrates humility, tenacity, demonstrates sustainability of what you want to do, and absolutely walk the talk of whatever you say. With regardless of what might be at stake, walk the talk. It takes a bit longer. It took me, I must say, about 5 years, even with my very strong brand. As I came into the job, it took 5 years for me to say, things are moving.
I think that's a wonderful insight. And I wonder if HR people listening will recognize some percentage of your time has to be responding to the urgency the CEO brings to the business, right? That's your job. When the CEO clicks their fingers, everybody has to snap into line. But most of your job, and you work out what percentage is it? Is it 60? Is it 70? Is it 80? The real contribution you make will be felt over years and decades as you build that team that is capable of doing whatever the business might need to do in the future. You've got to have a longer term perspective, not just a responsive one. I love that. Thank you. But talking about a longer term perspective, let's get to our final topic of conversation, because I don't want to miss out on a project that I know is underway. And if people are listening to this episode sometime in the future, hopefully they'll be able to go on to their favorite bookstore and buy a copy of your book. At the moment, I know you're working hard on it, but you are trying to distill the wisdom that you've been able to gather in your life and through your career. Obviously, some of the principles that flow from both the Toyota background, the Kaizen principles that helped Toyota to build their brand over decades, but also the Jameel principles that come from the family and the business, and then your own personal insights. Give us just a taste of the contribution that I really I've been able to read an early copy of the book and give some feedback, and I can't wait for people that I know to get copies of this, and I'll definitely be gifting it to people, because I think you just have a wonderful way of telling stories that then invite us to learn lessons. Give us a sense of what you're trying to achieve with this project.
Graeme, again, thank you very much for bringing this up. I'm always truthful in whatever I do, whatever I say, and this will be no exception. I never thought I had something worthy of going down in what people call a book. You know, the word book seemed like these are for people, these are philosophers, these are the world of academia that have really spent their lives, testing and doing and trying and making all sorts of theories that go into. I never thought I had anything of that sort. Nothing really. But I get a lot of feedback from people. They say, Faisal, you've got a couple of things there. Yeah, it's interesting. Why don't you write it down? And that, believe me, this was going on for decades. I never thought it was worthy of anything. That's why I continue to call it 2 cents. Okay, that's where the 2 cents come from. When I finally decided and I pulled my courage, and here is between brackets, humility have to be taken with a degree of, it has to be in check. Too much of it is not good, too little of it is not good. Okay. And maybe I had it I had too much of it, maybe, because it took me all this time to pull my courage to write it down. And I'll tell you why I decided to write it down. And then again, just for the audience to be aware of this. So my age is 74. I'll be turning 75 very soon. I've been a business leader for 50 years, and that's all I did. All I did from day one. And I was very, very lucky to kick off and started my life as a leader from day one. Of course, not as a CEO, but I was a leader of people in a very, very challenging manner. And I've moved on from one job to the other, from one role to the other, from this to that. And I've always tried to be really learning, a learner. I wanted to be a learner throughout my life. And through all the tools that are available, all the possibilities that are available, to be a good learner. And the best learner is somebody that can look at things, whether they're read, whether they're heard, whether they're practiced, and tirelessly picks one or two things every single day. Every single day. You get the snowball effect at the end. If you keep doing this, you pick one or two things and you keep moving, your snowball's going to be big and big and big. All right. So now at this stage of life, I have a very large family, Graham, very, very large. Okay. To the people like you and most of the people in the West, they'll say, this guy's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I did say that, I think, the first time you told me.
I don't regret it. As a matter of fact, as a matter of fact, it is the one thing that's keeping me very much going today. And that's the size of my family. I have 24 kids between daughters and sons. And you can make the maths and see how many grandchildren do I have.
Mm.
So I worked very hard for these people. In our part of the world, the relationships between family is still very, very close. And I up to this moment, I have the responsibility of their well-being in everything, in every way possible. And therefore, I said, I owe to them, not just to make my inheritance the state that they will take, but my 2 cents. So I said, all right, I'm going to write my 2 cents for that audience. That audience is why I'm writing those 2 cents. And I said, maybe there will be people that are in that category that can still, they're not my children, but I look at young people, and as I rub shoulders with them in the streets, in the malls, and I look at them, believe me, Graham, as my child, my children. And I have this love for humanity. So I picked and I went through, my entire 50 years, and I said, what did I learn? What are the moments, the many aha moments that contributed to who I am today and what I represent? So I tried to summarize all of this in about 13, 14 chapters. However, the theme of it all is that love is key to anything and everything we do. And that's what I call positive emotions. That's why the book is called Emonomics, which is the economics of positive emotions. Emonomics. And there, I we can have many podcasts. I can bore you and bore your audience with the key parts of that. But you will see that there's nothing really special about it. It is so simple. It is so common sense, and that when people do it, that's what I've done. It's my experience with my own family, with my own kids. What's keeping me going, what's giving me the energy I have, and I have a lot of it. My heart is younger than most of the young people that you have, Graham. My I am I'm not as agile as I would have liked to be, and it is primarily because of the huge, huge Olympic swimming pool of love that I swim in every single moment of my life. That really what gives me going. And if we are able to translate that into the business world, into the family world, into the community world, into any interaction as human beings, regardless of what you look like, what you believe in, how old you are, what are your, books you've read or not read. We just love each other. And I'll close with an observation. I was one day in one of the airports in the United States waiting for a flight, and there was this black family that have got 2, 3 young kids that came and sat, in the lounge right next to me, and they were minding their own business. And then a few minutes later, another white family comes in, similar age, similar kids, and they just walked in. They said the left was for the black, the right for what, I'm just making no characterization, but they were apart. Graham, less than 5 minutes later, the mother and the father both were stuck on their each sides, but the kids started playing with each other.
Mm.
They were having a ball.
Mm.
They demonstrated love because that's their instinct. So we should all do this, regardless of any consideration whatsoever. We can have our beliefs, we can have our differences. That's perfectly okay. But I'm not going to judge you on the basis of anything other than you are a great human being.
Fantastic, Faisal. And what a great way to sum up a few episodes where we've been talking about how do people think about what life might look like after the traditional end of a career. And your answer is there's no such thing. If you love what you do, if you love the people you do it with, if you love the people you do it for, keep doing it. Allow that to be your guiding force. If you're doing it for the money and the love isn't there, of course you're going to run out of energy for it. But if the love is guiding it, well, why stop? We are going to have to make sure we do a follow-up to this when the book is released. Faisal, we'll have you back on and you can take us through a few of those chapters and some of the lessons from it. But for today, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights. And thank you on behalf of all of us to your family for giving you a reason to put all of those 2 cents down on paper. I'm sure we'll all get value from it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. Look forward to it.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Elephants in the Boardroom. A huge thank you to my co-host, Graeme, and to our guest, Faisal, and to you for listening. And of course, thank you again to our sponsors, Achilles, for supporting the podcast and for the important work they do in helping organizations build more transparent, resilient, and sustainable supply chains. Thanks ever so much for listening. Please do subscribe, share the episode, and join us next time as we continue to explore the grey elephant shaping the future of business, leadership, and society. Goodbye for now.